volunteerism because the theme of my speech tonight is quasi-volunteerism. Quasi-volunteerism. Just to give you an example of what I mean, wouldn't it be nice if you needed a building permit or something from the city of Ventura and you walked in and said, hey, I live over at this place and I need this permit, and they said to you, oh, that's really an Oxnard, but I can write that for you anyway, even though it's in the jurisdiction of Arson. I can take care of that for you so you don't have to go to Oxnard. Wouldn't it be great? You wouldn't have to make a trip. Instead, you usually get the runaround, right? So my tale is interesting because it might be a little scary. I'd like to tell you a little bit about government efficiency. Okay, now just be calm. In order to do that, though, I have to take you on a tale. And it is kind of a tale of innovation. I just gave a great speech about innovation and how innovation drives progress, but we're talking about the fire department here. And innovation in the fire department is not necessarily linear, for sure. It's based on need, it's based on technology, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's based on errors. But let me take you on a little bit of a journey, and I'll get to a place where we're going to really understand what I mean by sharing amongst government organizations. But let's wind the clock back, 1915, 1920. Right now, there are 10 cities in Ventura County. Ventura County has about 450 square miles of country. 10 cities, almost a population of 1 million people, clustered together all on the 101 at the same time.
Yeah.
In 1915, it was much different. We had fire departments back then. The city of Oxnard had a fire department. Ventura had a fire department. St. Paul even had a fire department, and I'll bet you even Fillmore had an all-volunteer fire department. But if you remember, those of you, maybe many of you weren't there, but Dan, I'm sure you remember the horse-drawn steam cart. I don't think that Ventura could share a fire truck with Oxnard even if they tried. I doubt they could get the horses to run all the way to Oxnard to put out a fire. Either the fire would be out and on the ground, or they'd have to probably stop and feed the horses along the way, or get tired, rest them, and change out. So I don't think sharing of fire trucks or any type of resources really happened back then. Plenty of volunteers, though, plenty of willing volunteers. When there was a fire in the country, out in the farmlands, way back in the day, there wasn't a lot of skilled labor. Oh yeah, there was a fire chief back then, and there might have been an assistant fire chief like me. But there wasn't a bunch of crewmen out to put the fire out. Basically, legend has it, when a fire happened in the hills, the fire chief would go in the bar and say, hey, any men who want work today that can walk, come with me now. Those of you who can't walk, I'll see you at the Grady's tomorrow. And that was how they conscripted labor back then in some cases. So the labor wasn't that skilled, the technology wasn't that great, so the ability to share resources wasn't there. Fast forward a little bit to good old WW2, got a little bit of improvement in technology brought back to the local government because of the war. We got a great lead because of necessity on foreign lands. We brought that back home. Radios, better engines, better trucks, better equipment. And we started to put that to work. And I don't know if you remember, as we progress into the 50s, you remember the old civil defense days, right? Steel hats, the star up there on your forehead, the bomb shelters in your basement. Remember you got the little pamphlets at school, got to build a bomb shelter. Well, there's something that great came about in civil defense. As we returned from WW2, we had Korea, we were afraid of an attack from the communist state. We figured out, and we were having fires back then in the local country, but we figured out that communities aren't really set to take care of a big disaster. They can take care of things on a day-to-day basis, but we can't take care of the big earthquake or the big fire. We don't have enough help. So the state did something very, very smart back then. They did something that is still, matter of fact, I employed it last weekend. So in 1953, they enacted the Master Mutual Aid Act of California. And what that did was it enabled the 56 counties and all their city jurisdictions in between the ability to share emergency resources free across jurisdictional lines if their need was there. You could call and request help, and all the requesting jurisdiction needed to do was pay for food and pay for gas. And that was it. So basically it was like free help if you had a disaster. And that was really a landmark achievement, and nobody was doing it anywhere else, and I'll prove it to you because we lived through it about 50 years later in the 9/11 crisis. But back to 1950, 60 era, one thing that's great about having your own town is you get control. You get to do what you want, right? Well, that's the same thing in the fire department. I got my fire department. I'll make a fire truck any way I want. I'll put what I want on it. I'll put who I want on it. And that's great for the local jurisdiction. But as soon as you send it out of your town over somewhere else, it gets to be a little bit of a problem. And it came up. It came up when somebody called for help and somebody came and they tried to connect the hoses on the fire trucks, and they couldn't connect them. They couldn't screw them together because the fittings, the threads were different. So we had a problem. Nobody knew when they called for a fire engine from Santa Paula to Ventura, really didn't know what was coming. And he didn't have any control over it because it was Santa Paula's choice to make a fire truck. The types of hose, the types of ladder was all different. The types of fittings, the types of threads. So this really became a problem, and I don't know if you remember, but the fires in the 1960s, Bel Air tragedy in Los Angeles, fire in 1970, Malibu fire, 770 houses destroyed, 16 people killed, and we have tons of resources now. We're a growing metropolis. Our towns are growing together. We've got fire trucks everywhere, but they all got different stuff on them. They all got different threads on them. That got to be a big problem. So the city leaders at that time in 1970 got together with a little organization of 5 jurisdictions: Los Angeles County, Ventura County, the Forest Service, and the State Fire Department got together and created an organization called Fire Scope. Fire Scope was designed to figure out what kind of thread's got to go on the hose, what kind of ladder's got to go on the fire truck, what type of fire truck you want, and they made it a standard. They created a standard for us, so that if I called Santa Barbara for a fire engine and I said I want a 5 Type 1 fire engines to respond to Ventura to help me, I knew what I was requesting and they knew what to send. So we figured this out in about 1970. And that was awesome, because it really solved our problem, a lot of our problems. And the way they did it was kind of unique. They said, hey, you can build your fire truck, Warren, if you want to in your town. You can put whatever you want on it. But if you want to send it to Santa Paula, you can't send it unless it's got the right threads on it, it's got the right ladders on it, it's got the amount of hose on it. You cannot send it. And that was nice. Because everybody needed help. They knew Santa Paula, Warren's fire department, he says, hey, maybe I need some help someday. I better put the right threads on my fire truck, and I better offer it up to send it somewhere so I get some help. And so that drove change in the 70s, and that was great. Well, I had another problem, kind of ended up, there's an organization, organizing all these fire engines got to be a little bit of a problem. And in 1974 or 5, the same organization addressed it. Nobody knew who was in charge. Matter of fact, World War II was great because it gave us a command structure that was employed from that period all the way up into the 70s. But war strategy wasn't really fire and disaster strategy. It was different. It was one general's in charge, and what happens, that's great when you got one one army and you're fighting one enemy. But if you're fighting a fire crossing multiple jurisdictions who are in charge, you got multiple generals, and you have to organize this rapidly gathering force, rapidly mobilizing force, and deploy them quickly for days. And they figured out a system to do that that is still in place today. So it's called the Incident Command System. And it's very important because I think you'll be very proud of it. You'll be as proud of it as I am when I get to the end of my tale, which is the Incident Command System was designed so that any emergency can function underneath it. So a vehicle's fired out here on Victoria Road, or a giant 50,000 acre fire up here in the mountains. Doesn't matter. You can employ the same system. It expands and contracts with the magnitude of the emergency, which was truly fantastic. So we started employing this in the 70s, and when I came on, and I'll save my speech for another day about why I have an architecture degree versus became a fire department, but that decision happened in 1979. I'll just tell you now. Maybe I'll come back and tell you the rest of it. When I came on the 80s, we were employing an incident command system, and we understood what it was to have common language amongst different jurisdictions. And so I could travel to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles could travel up here. We would fight fire together, and that started to become really, really efficient. And that was great. A little bit of another wrinkle, though. I'm a chief. I'm the deputy fire chief right now. Well, how good a firefighter am I? Well, I don't know. Sometimes the deputy chief of Santa Paula might be a better firefighter than the deputy chief of Ventura. Who's going to figure out who's in charge and what my level of expertise is to fight this fire? Just because I'm a chief? Y'all know that some bosses aren't that great. Some bosses are great. Sometimes the worker could be the best boss, right? And so tactical ability to fight fire is not necessarily administrative ability. And in the 90s, that came to a head as well. And we developed a system called the Incident Command Qualification System. And so a lot of times, what we do, and I spent probably the last 14, 15 years achieving a higher level of tactical qualification so I could be certified to command a fire. But we have a pecking order and a hierarchy of tactical ability, and then we have rank that's another ladder. So when I go to Los Angeles and I say I am an incident commander, they understand it doesn't matter if I'm a deputy fire chief or I'm a captain in the station. That's a separate qualification. I've gone down all these things, done all these tasks, commanded all these smaller fires to work up to the point where I can command a big fire. Does that make sense? So you see how this technology kind of grows, but it doesn't grow. It grew from need. And like I said, sometimes it goes backwards. We go backwards a little bit. And I'll tell you, because the next step, we're going a little backwards. We're starting to get known in Southern California for being very good at this, where the gears are starting to mesh in Southern California. We have a lot of fires here. So we mass a lot of fire engines very quickly. Well, not everybody does that. Unfortunately, we experienced that on 9/11, as I alluded earlier. 9/11, you remember that disastrous day, and one of the things that came out of that 9/11 Commission report was the fire department and the police couldn't even talk to each other. The fire department in New York couldn't ask for any help. They were on separate, it was Warren's fire department problem. They'd done their own thing. They're a giant fire department. They never anticipated that they'd have a big problem like that and have to ask for help. And they did need it, and they couldn't make it happen then. And so what happened after that was the good old incident command. Everybody went to Southern California and said, "Hey, how are you guys doing that over there? You you guys are mobilizing a lot of different fire trucks, and a bunch of different people are in charge at the same time. How you guys doing that? We told them. And so the little incident command system that we developed in 1970 is now the national incident command system, employed across the country. And it's not just on brush fires, it's anything. From a hurricane to a flood, to a national disaster, to a wildfire, to a vehicle fire, it doesn't matter. So the federal government took that over and is pressing that down everywhere in the country. And it's truly something to be proud of. So all that has been taking place, and what am I getting to for volunteerism? Let's take it all back to Ventura. Ventura, the 10 cities here, Ventura. We have the mutual aid promise that we set up in 1950. Now we got the same fire trucks. Now we're starting to grow together. And sometimes I put a fire station, I got a fire station in the county that's kind of closer to the city than the city's fire station. Just because when the city put it there, well, they put some more houses closer to the county. Maybe they made the line move. And it became very apparent that it was very inefficient for the city to drive all the way out to where the city boundary was when the county was closer, or vice versa. In some cases, the county is farther away than the city can. So the city's better to go closer. We couldn't really do that. We couldn't fix that problem until we got on the same radio frequency and employed a portion of that little promise in 1955, which is a promise to share resources, just, one fire truck across the line in case it was closer. And so we started doing that. And we did it, and now we're doing it across the county, and it's pretty neat. Technology's improved again, as Agnes was talking about. Now we have little pods on our fire engines where they tell the computers in the sky where we are at any moment. And that's pretty nifty, because if a Simi Valley fire truck is driving through the city of Ventura and a call comes up closest to the Simi Valley fire truck, the Simi fire truck's going to take it. It's pretty neat, huh? Free of charge. Simi's not charging Ventura for that. They're just doing it because of that mutual aid. One day Simi's going to need it, right? Pretty neat. So as you can see, and I'm taking you all there in a very short time frame, and you weren't really afraid of government efficiency, were you? But it's truly something to be proud of, because regardless of jurisdiction, in the county of Ventura, each one of our fire departments are on the same radio frequency. We respond the closest rig, regardless of color, regardless of the name on the side of the door. And I think that's the best service. And nobody pays anybody back. Everybody gets their due eventually with some kind of help. And I take that to the planning desk, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure to tell you a little bit about government efficiency and volunteerism. And I just wanted to, I'm very excited because it's something that developed out of Southern California, that neighbor need, right? Big fire, need help now from my neighbors. And it's gone to national significance. Something to be proud of. And neighbor helping neighbor, volunteerism. Thank you very much.